misericordia daggers, looking for a chink in their unholy armor. Those brave or suicidal enough wield anti-tank hammers, polearms with explosives powerful enough to tear apart even the strongest of armor. Still, the humble bolt-action rifle is the workhorse of the battlefield, and most yeoman soldiery as well as heretic legionnaires carry it. Many other weapons, though rarer, are in common use. Machine guns, sniper rifles, grenades of both shrapnel and gas variety, as well as experimental anti-materiel rifles. While the heretic forces are equipped with blades of eternally burning fire, living bullets that infect their targets and turn them into undead metastatic vessels, forever bound in servitude to the devils, and heavy flamethrowers forged in the iron pits of Dis, belching the flames of the lake of fire where damned souls wither for all eternity. With both infernal and divine powers actively at work on earth, holy icons, symbols, cursed trinkets, and unholy artifacts are carried by soldiery of all ranks. Their power is undeniable and has turned the tide of many a battle. Martyrdom pills are taken regularly by trench crusaders looking to take the enemies of God down with them. They inure the faithful against pain and exhaustion, but extract a brutal toll after their effect wanes. Many trench pilgrims wear iron capirots that both shield their minds from the horror of the creatures of hell, but also incorporate a gas mask in their design, a useful feature on battlefields where the use of chlorine and mustard gas, as well as more dire fumes created by the twisted chemists in the Bulgius of Inferno, is commonplace. Elite forces have even more advanced and esoteric equipment and arms. For example, the observers of the Synod of Strategic Prophecy wear a specially constructed helmet, which allows them to hear the voice of God, and thus allows them to perceive immediate past, present, and future simultaneously to a degree. This allows them to perform martial feats unrivaled, but it comes at a cost. A living human is not meant to hear the holy words, and as the voice of God never decays, they must concentrate with superhuman focus to hear what they need to pick the right course of action. Sleep is impossible with the divine echo ringing in their ears. Heavy sedation and use of mind-altering drugs is necessary for them to withstand the heavy burden of their battlefield role for any length of time. For 300 years, the Principality of New Antioch has stood defiantly as the focal point of the Church and the faithful at the very edge of the shadow cast by the gate of hell. It is the home of all our hopes, the bulwark against heretic forces, and the first line of defense against the devil's might. Should New Antioch fall, all the Levant will be lost. War has never left this corner of the world. The ancient city of Antioch was destroyed by a mysterious demonic weapon in the year 1545. But the faithful never gave up their positions in the ruins. Despite the lethal demonic essence emanating from the crater that was left behind, the garrison held on, even as mighty Constantinople fell to the legions of Chimares, Marquis of Hell. Before it was destroyed, the ancient city of Antioch was always the first line of defense to be put to test. Thus it is no wonder that in the year 1559, the Sword Congress of Vienna agreed to rebuild and fortify the city, and that a yearly tithe is to be sent to New Antioch by all the faithful nations, though this levy is rarely in the form of coin. Instead, endless supply trains of foodstuffs, tools, ammunition, weaponry, machinery, and skilled workers and engineers come from across Europa and the Mediterranean Sea, as well as the African dominions. Keeping the supply routes open is a constant game of cat and mouse, as heretic infiltrators and raiders harry the caravans and ships that allow the principality to exist to this day. Since those days, New Antioch has grown to be the most important fortress city in the world, the sword and the shield of Europa and Africa. All the princes of the church and heads of the various states and domains who oppose hell understand that it is better to fight their battles against the heretics away from their heartlands. To this day, New Antioch has withstood 8 great sieges, and its famed walls, with their 77 mighty towers, have never been breached. This is partly due to hundreds of anchorites, metallic battle shrines with devoted entombed within them, that are embedded into the walls, keeping a vigilant watch day and night. More than anything else, it is the volunteers who come to serve under the banner of Christ that ensure the continuous existence of the principality. Thus, in the streets of the city, one can hear hundreds of languages and dialects. One might observe hussars of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, brushing shoulders with the last remnants of the Varangian Guard, or hear the sermons of a street preacher from Eire, extolling the soldiery of Ethiopia to lay down their lives for the cause. Perhaps they might even witness the church engineers' procession, taking their latest invention to be tested on the front lines. This all happens under the watchful eyes of the Office of the Propagation of Virtue that tirelessly patrol the streets. While they are quite happy to turn a blind eye to the revelries of soldiers, they ferociously persecute even the slightest deviation from church doctrine. The execution of heretics is a weekly spectacle that draws immense crowds. Factories spew black smoke as newly constructed tanks roll out of the workshops. Foundries burn white-hot day and night in order to keep the artillery battalions, the pride and joy of New Antioch, at full strength. In the techno-laboratories of the city, the church toils away in creating the superhuman communicants, empowered by the cloned flesh and blood of the Redeemer. Thousands of workers give their lives in horrific accidents and overwork each year, and great statues celebrating their sacrifices stand around the city. Despite all these preparations, it is a grim reality that New Antioch could never withstand the full onslaught of the combined heretic forces. It is only thanks to the ferocious and bloody internal conflict amongst the devils that has allowed the principality to stand to this day. The archdevils and princes of hell bicker and plot against each other, and only rarely does one of them gain supremacy for long enough to mount a full-scale invasion. Even though the war has stretched for centuries, with decades of nervous lull between great battles, the rulers of hell are immortal, and to them the war has barely even started. They are beings that have existed before there was time and wish to savor the agony of the mortals who die in their millions. And thus the great war rages on, sometimes with long years of silence, followed by sudden, ferocious assaults. As the nominal supreme commander of all the faithful armed forces, the Duke of New Antioch is a title of unrivaled prestige and honor. But despite swearing fealty to the Duke, in reality, troops who come to do battle against hell from across all of Christendom operate in units of their own, taking commands from their own leaders. It is worth noting that some soldiers renounce their citizenship and take up the cross and come to serve under Duke Constantine alone. Thus, the standing army of the Principality is the greatest single fighting force the faithful can muster, and those who serve on the walls of the Home of Hopes are rightfully proud of their livery. In recent years, the Duke has dispatched small forces into no man's land to gather intelligence and look for resources. When the need is great, the Synod of Strategic Prophecy sends their famed observers to support the war effort. This order of warrior monks lives a life of absolute solitude, sharpening their minds and bodies to make themselves living weapons in the hand of God. Once a soldier joins the order, they very rarely leave the Temple of the Word. the only exception being when they are summoned to the battlefield, a situation where their unique abilities can decisively shift the balance in favor of the faithful. Even the slightest disturbance to their prayers or training will mean that they will not be able to commune with the Lord of all creation. Thus, the days of the observers are spent in secluded, cloistered cells when not practicing their martial or mental disciplines. Observers wear a specially crafted oculus helmet, enabling them to attune to the voice of God. This remarkable connection grants them the capacity to simultaneously perceive the immediate past, present, and future to a degree. This allows them to perform martial feats unrivaled, but a living human is not meant to hear the holy words, so it comes at a cost. Since the voice of God never decays, they must concentrate with superhuman focus to extricate the righteous guidance amidst the narrative, spanning from creation's inception to the present moment. The resonance of the divine echo, ringing ceaselessly in their ears, renders sleep impossible. Therefore, they must resort to potent sedatives and mind-altering drugs for them to endure the heavy burden of their battlefield role for any length of time. The observers diligently practice the recitation of the words of God, granting them the power to issue commands to anyone they address, friend or foe. The special metal of their helmet allows them to replicate the holy word as closely as it is possible, compelling any creature in creation to obey them momentarily to a degree. Though they master many weapons, the trench polearm stands as the preferred choice for observers. This tool allows them to skillfully vault over barbed wire and drop into enemy trenches with devastating force. Guided by the omniscient words of the Almighty, they possess the ability to evade nearly any strike. With proper focus, they foresee impending attacks within the crystal of the eye of God that is incorporated into their helmet. As such, enemies' efforts to take them down are often frustrated, since the observer simply moves the minimum required to avoid any harm, knowing precisely where the blow of the heretic was going to land. However, even the slightest slip in their concentration means that they might lose the voice of God that guides them, rendering them just as vulnerable to death as any other mortal soldier. Since the beginning of the Great War some 800 years ago, the faithful have faced a problem that is seemingly impossible to overcome. They are unable to take the battle to the enemy. For such is the supernatural power of the open gate to hell, that even approaching within sight of it is impossible for all but the most strong-willed and pious. Within the inferno await domains of the lost and legions of devils. But in utmost secrecy, the Church produced an answer to this quandary: the Paladin program. Paladins are by far the greatest creations of the Mendelist order. They are near-perfect communicants, for in their veins flows the purest blood that the Meta-Christ program has been able to produce. Paladins are warriors with such physical stature and inner holiness that not only can they approach Jerusalem's vale of tears, but also enter the very gates of Inferno and undertake missions within hell itself, and return to tell the tale. Each is said to represent near perfection of human form, both mind and body. Though much scarred and burned from the long centuries of war, they have been forced to endure for the sake of all in creation. Paladins reside in secluded cells within a secret wing of Castel Sant'Angelo until the hour comes and the Council of Saints sends them forth to do battle. In such time, the Paladin emerges from their seclusion. They go to their arming chamber and kneel at the center upon the mosaic of the militant Christ the Lion. They are then armed and armored by blinded and gelded serfs, for no impure gaze or carnal desire is to fall upon the Paladin by the servants of the Church, and briefed on their mission by one of the cardinal generals. They are given the last rites prehumously should they fall. for there is no mission more dangerous than war within Gehenna. Originally there were 12 paladins, but now only 9 remain. 2 have fallen in battle, and it is rumored one has turned traitor, though the church vehemently denies such slander upon pain of death. Despite ceaseless efforts, the Holy Mendelist Order have been unable to produce even a single new paladin in the last 3 centuries. It has proven just as difficult to replace their holy armor and weaponry. Since the destruction of the holy city of Jerusalem, it has not been possible to harvest more Golgothic tektites required for the machining process for the paladins' armaments. Thus their elaborate suits of armor, despite the fastidious care of the dicastery of the service of church militant disciples, are much scarred, burned and corroded, and many pieces of armor have been slated to be reforged in a vain hope that even the tiniest shard of the required materials could be recovered. Thus each paladin is forced to endure searing pain like no earthly suffering where their armor has weakened, relying on their unshakable faith during their lonely crusades into perdition. Each of the 9 circles of hell has its own foul atmosphere and deadly environment, from noxious fumes to burning heat or a bitter coldness below absolute zero, requiring a specific suit of armor to withstand the infernal elements. Thus, when a paladin enters the gates of hell, they know they must succeed alone or die trying. No help will be forthcoming, not even from one within their own order. Paladins are used only under the orders of the Council of Saints, and even then, extremely sparingly. Each mission they undertake must bring great and tangible benefits for the Church and the overall war effort, and its long-term benefit must be determined by the Synod of Strategic Prophecy. Paladins are tasked with missions such as exterminating key nobles of hell, destroying laboratories, creating some new devastating variant of the Black Grail, or interrogating devils with holy fire and the blood of the Lamb until they give up their infernal plans. As the war rages against the minions of hell, strange visions torment the faithful across the globe. Men and women touched by heaven are granted visions, and revelations are made by the messengers of God. Sisters of the holy orders are marked by stigmata and take up sword and cross, as instructed by the angels. Those who have transgressed seek to atone for their sins by taking as many followers of the devil with them to the afterlife. So they come, the mad and the maimed, the God-touched and the guilt-ridden, all gathering around prophets and prophetesses, forming trench pilgrim processions, disorganized groups which arm themselves and follow the prophets of the Lord unto the front lines. They fight with unrivaled zeal, throwing themselves against the heretics and arming themselves with anything they can get their hands on, from the oldest muskets to scourges and Molotov cocktails. Pilgrims are not officially sanctioned by the Holy See, but the Church still blesses the crusades of the faithful. Thus, the pilgrim processions are a common sight on the battlefields, often charging across no man's land in suicidal assaults against the heretics, directed by the visions of the prophets and prophetesses who lead them, and urged on by the whips of castigators who are charged with instilling the fear of God in their troops. The bulk of the pilgrims are men and women with little military training, but when they don the iron capirote of a trench pilgrim, they can face even a demon from the deepest bulges of hell unflinchingly. Nor is death necessarily an end to their mission. Sometimes the 7th Meta-Christ will deem a fallen pilgrim worthy and bring them back as martyr penitents, warriors halfway between heaven and earth, able to fight once more and feel no pain from bullet or bayonet thrust. Rarer and more dangerous are the stigmatic nuns, holy sisters who manifest wounds to match those of the 3rd Meta-Christ, whom the nuns venerate. They excel in close quarters combat, for each bleeding wound that they suffer makes them stronger, not weaker, as their devotion to suffering as their Lord once did gives them strength and endurance not found on mere common mortals. Armed with swords and pistols, they cross no man's land, heedless of any danger, praying to sustain wounds for the Redeemer, which in turn will transform them into the very vengeance of the Lord. In front of the trench, pilgrims are driven the ecclesiastic prisoners, either captured enemies of the true faith, forced to make a final act of contrition, or volunteer sinners seeking redemption. Each is strapped with high explosives, which are detonated once they reach the enemy lines. They dash across the killing grounds, hoping to either miraculously survive the blast and escape, or take as many followers of Lucifer with them as they can, depending on their convictions. The most puissant of pilgrim processions will be accompanied by a shrine anchorite, a metal behemoth some 12 feet tall, a living altar of war almost completely immune to any damage. The interior of the anchorite is covered in spikes and barbed hooks, so that the monk who controls this colossus is in a constant state of torment, rejoicing in the pain so they can suffer as their Lord once did. In combat they wield adamantine Catherine wheels of massive proportions, which they use to crush the sinners and heretics into a pulp, and then string them upon the wheel as a warning to others. There is a bewildering number and variety of trench pilgrim processions. The penitents of pious revenge swear in the name of St. Olga and uses flamethrowers, burning grenades, and incendiary ammunition to assail the heretics. The pilgrims of the Iron Path follow St. Rita of Cassia and go to battle with hammers, mauls, maces, and cudgels, and hammer nails into their heads in the memory of the saint they venerate. The Theban Legion of Rome carries the heads of the heretics upon their standards in the memory of their patron, Saint Maurice. They fight with swords and other blades, competing with each other for the number of heretic heads they amass. Trench pilgrims of the procession of the Sacred Affliction are known for their zeal for close-quarters combat, their armor decorated with icons and shields adorned with the depictions of the saints, which despite appearances can withstand machine gun bullets, and the millstones they carry in order to tie them around the necks of sinners before they suffocate them in the mud and blood of no man's land. Shrine anchorites are metal behemoths, some 12 to 15 feet tall, a living altar of war, almost completely immune to any damage, with a diesel engine belching smoke and trumpets echoing with prayers. The interior of the anchorite is covered in spikes and barbed hooks, so that the monk pilot is in a constant state of torment, rejoicing in their pain so they can suffer as their Lord once did. The exterior is festooned with icons, holy relics, and devotional prayer scrolls, each according to the traditions of the pilgrim sect that the anchorite serves. The first anchorites were built a long time ago in the fortress monastery of Velerad, in Greater Moravia. Several hundred of these battle machines were built under the guidance of Saint Methodius, though now the craft is lost, as the monastery was destroyed by a death commando infiltration force of the demon Marcosius. Later innovations of the engineering foundry of New Antioch created machine armor, a far smaller but more maneuverable personal protective suit based upon the anchorite design. But the pilgrim processions have neither access to these marvels of modern engineering, nor do they have any desire to give up their anchorites, which act both as fearsome engines of war as well as mobile shrines that form a focal point to the prayers and devotions of the pilgrims. The pilot monk or nun, once installed, never leaves the shrine anchorite until the day they die. Once they fall in battle, or rarely of old age, their remains are reverently removed, and body parts are preserved in reliquaries mounted upon the anchorite. Thus, each of these war machines is a testament to its long history of war against the forces of hell. In battle, each anchorite carries a great adamantine Catherine wheel, as well as an immense bone-breaker mace to bring the wrath of God upon the sinners, heretics, and apostates. In a show of piety and atonement, it is a common practice for trench pilgrims or stigmatic nuns volunteer to be broken on the wheel and serve in their final battle mounted upon this device of execution. As a sign of both their willingness to suffer for their sins and for the spiritual protection their sacrifice is said to grant to the anchorite. The Church frowns upon this custom, but pilgrims flock to their anchorites on the eve of any battle, hoping to be granted the honor of perishing upon the wheel. A shroud of darkness blankets the world. Smoke and brimstone spews from the yawning gates of inferno enveloping the lands, where people have abandoned God and openly wage war against his creation. It is a grim reality that a full third of humanity has bent its knee before the idols of hell. The main satanic military force on earth are the heretic legions, raised from amongst these citizens of the damned. Spies are sent into hell's domains under special absolution by the Cardinal Protector. Most are caught, never to be seen again, save for some whose eternally screaming heads are returned to New Antioch, branded with bleeding runes that mock the Holy Trinity. Yet some do make it back to the light, whispering of the horrors they have witnessed, of firstborn cast into the mouths of the burning statues of Baal, and human flesh sold by the pound in dreadful markets. They speak of the great idols of the golden calf, and rapturous men and women who prostrate themselves before them, carving layers of their own flesh in ecstatic offering. Inverted pyramids and towers plunge into the depths of these cities, built of iron and black stone. Within these pits stand sacrificial altars, where weeping captives are slowly sliced to death over agonizing days and weeks with wicked knives made of infernal basalt. Cathedrals to the princes of hell hang from great arches of volcanic stone, while condemned are crucified on hundreds of upside-down crosses. Accounts speak of sprawling factories made of mutilated flesh and metal, their forges yielding endless munitions for the ongoing war. Guided by the teachings of Tartarus's smiths, alchemists toil over colossal weapons and armored behemoths, wielding the forbidden secrets of their patron's metallurgy to forge instruments of death and suffering beyond the grasp of any human engineer. Once proud cities of earth, where churches have been toppled and entire populations are now dedicated towards bringing down the very throne of heaven. Amongst the forsaken citizens that endure within the earthly domains of hell, the greatest status is afforded to the soldiers fighting in the Great War. But joining the army of damnation is no easy task. Those who wish to win a place amongst the heretic legions must make an unholy pilgrimage to the burning bronze gates of hell, where, even from leagues away, the infernal heat sears both flesh and spirit until the pain becomes unbearable. In the Valley of Tears, the great road that leads to the gate, paved as it is with wailing souls and lamentations, is littered with endless mounds of charred bodies. Many are still half alive, writhing in agony, trapped in a grotesque twilight between life and death, their wickedness deemed insufficient. These discarded souls are doomed to writhe in agony until the day of judgment. Those who make it within sight of hell's maw are considered worthy and are initiated into the legions, taking unbreakable vows that chain them into darkness for all eternity, their bodies branded with the mark of the devil lord that has claimed them. Armories of hell then equip them for battle, and heretic priests beckon forth new supplicants, as dictated by the whispers of their patron archdevils. Thus a new heretic legionnaire is born. They hail archdevils as their masters, and are thus damned for all eternity. Yet there are some who push further on, to the very gate itself and beyond. Their very flesh ignites, never to recover, but those with the blackest souls can enter Inferno itself. Amongst those, the anointed are especially revered amongst the legions. They are the paragons of unhinged brutality, men and women of colossal vigor and unyielding devotion. Having tread the accursed path to the shores of the lake of eternal flame, where the damned wither and contort in ceaseless torment, the anointed emerge forever scarred by the embrace of abyssal fires. The blackened and burnt flesh of the anointed will never heal, but in exchange, they are granted the right to wear heavy Gehenna armored suits, and they gain strength to wield weapons that a normal man could barely lift. It is said that glancing into their eyes, one can see the reflection of the very flames of hell, forever etched in their vision. Yet some who witness go even further in their depraved devotion. Suicide is a mortal sin, and one eagerly embraced by many. Most cry out for devils to notice their final sacrifice in vain, as the infernal nobles are capricious and delight in betraying their own as much as their enemies. But those with truly wicked and depraved souls are resurrected in contempt of the Redeemer, coming back as choristers, horrific mockeries of creation, whose severed heads sing unholy hymns praising the devil, their voices causing the ears of their enemies to bleed. Though the vast bulk of the heretic legions are made of mortal humans, hell often sends their own abhorrent progeny to reinforce their mortal foot soldiers. Nightmarish war beasts made of captured and possessed creatures, and dreaded artillery witches who act as mobile artillery supporting lighting assaults. Thus, in this accursed theatre of war, mortals and abominations march hand in withering hand, bound by the suffering ties of damnation. The wails of tortured beasts meld with the shrieks of damned souls, while the skies rain down fiery retribution upon all who dare to oppose the heretics' ceaseless crusade for a demented parity with their Creator. From a very early age, a select group of heretic youth are sent beyond the gates of hell to be raised as death commandos. Few are chosen, fewer return, but those who complete their training stand amongst the most elite of the heretic legions. Barracked in the seventh circle of Inferno, they are taught the deadly arts of assassination by the damned souls of the greatest killers and murderers whose souls now reside in hell. Here they undergo brutal training, mastering the use of all manner of weapons and poisons, and they are schooled in martial skills by the personal guard of the archdevil Beleth. They learn to slither as serpents through the battlefield, leaving murder in their wake. Their specially forged Tartarus claws are quenched in the waters of the river Styx, a source of poison more potent than any mortal venom. Many carry silenced pistols to take down targets unseen and unheard. Aside from their weapons, the Death Commandos are equipped with stealth generators that operate by diffracting light, utilizing the heart of an innocent and infernal technologies that hide them from the eyes of God. Once their training is complete, the Death Commandos emerge from the abyss as silent specters of carnage. Of the heretic troops fighting in the trenches of the Great War, the Death Commandos are the most feared by the faithful. Most infamous in the ranks are three master Death Commandos, Cain, Barabbas, and Haman, who simultaneously assassinated the Supreme Pontiff, the High Prophetess Elia, and the Holy Roman Emperor in the year 1894. This threw church forces into turmoil and allowed the heretic legions to launch a lightning offensive across the Levant and Europe. The tongues of the Death Commandos are ceremonially ripped out at the end of their training. They will never speak of what they have learned, and their unnerving silence adds to their sinister reputation. They communicate with each other with a complex system of inscrutable hand signals. From a young age, all heretics are taught that God-tyrant Yahweh demands obedience, But there are always brave souls who chafe at the yoke of divine oppression. In their bitter rage, these dauntless ones commit a form of ritual suicide to spit in the despot's eye, knowing they have not the strength to injure him apart from this little rebellion. Suicide is a mortal sin, and sacrificing yourself to the glory of hell is a yet greater affront to God. Some heretics are born with a gift of a sonorous voice, but little prospects of rising through the ranks. Those possessing a determination to excel, nevertheless, may pursue the dark path of becoming a chorister. Such supplicants go to one of the black altars of heretic abodes at the bottom of the deep inverted pyramid temples, dedicated to the greatest of archdevils. There they are dressed in the robes of dark devotion, lie on the altar, and mutilate themselves to death by carving unholy runes into their flesh. The more wounds they can suffer before perishing, the more pleasing it is said their offering is. The most devout slice their own throats, trying to cut as deep as they can before their miserable life leaves them. Most such wretches go to their doom in the lake of fire, but some are reborn as choristers after 9 days. Their corpses lurch back to their feet and finish their grisly beheading, and lift their severed heads that begin to sing hymns they have learned in the inferno. From their self-inflicted wounds spurts cold blood that forms diabolic symbols and changes to match the words of their unholy chorale. They head towards the front lines driven by a call no living can hear and join the heretic warband of their choosing. As their severed heads sing their agonizing hymns, the minds of their enemies are filled with visions from the pits of hell, weakening both the resolve and strength of those unfortunate enough to hear the dire song of a chorister. Their hymns are often the first thing a fresh recruit experiences on the battlefield, as their unholy voice rolls across the trenches, proclaiming a never-ending prophecy of the final victory of hell over heaven. The great military hospice of New Antioch has a separate wing for those who have never recovered from hearing choristers' dirge, their minds forever lost in a vision of eternal damnation, tied to their iron-frame beds, screaming of the world to come when all is covered under the darkness, lit only by eternal flames. Epidemics of typhus, malaria, typhoid, smallpox, yellow fever, pneumonia, trench fever, Marquisian disease, and countless others ravaged the trenches and battlefields of the Great War. But they all pale in comparison to the most dreaded of them all, the Black Grail. Beelzebub, Lord of the Flies, stands apart from the other lords of hell, who act mainly through their mortal followers. Instead, when he periodically gains supremacy in the bitter power struggles of the archfiends, he sends forth his deadliest curse. Infused with demonic essence from the bowels of the seventh layer of hell, where the putrid fortress of Beelzebub stands, spews forth a torrent of demonic hellflies, scorpions, locusts, and other infernal insects. The Hellgate opens and a veritable tidal wave of foulness emerges, flowing across the land at startling speed, consuming everything and leaving indescribable horror in its wake. After 9 days, the insect swarm exhausts itself, devouring its own in its insatiable hunger. The Black Grail is indiscriminate in its hatred of all living things. Its infections can spread to virtually any living biological matter, which bursts forth with tumors, boils, and weeping pustules. Puddles and ponds of melted flesh are left in its wake, endless mouths left screaming in their agony, for the Black Grail destroys the body but leaves the mind intact to suffer. The scientist priests of the church and the alchemists of the Sultanate fervently look for a way to inoculate their people against this foulest of diseases, but thus far they are without success. The only answer is to burn the infected settlements with specially constructed flamethrower tanks that use holy anointing oil as the fuel for their weapons. But if this is not done, or the countermeasures are too late, What happens next is even worse. Bodies of men, horses, dogs, insects and other animals of every kind that are infected by the Black Grail lurch to their feet, driven by a demonic will. Not living, not dead, they become vessels to spread the corruption of their master ever further, forming warbands that strive to find and infect life of any kind. They also gather things that mortals value, and bring this loot, as well as grisly trophies, to the feet of the idols of Beelzebub they erect. Thus the cult of the Black Grail mocks the devotions of the faithful and their prayers. At the head of such warbands stand the Knights of the Order of the Fly, those most depraved men and women who willingly embrace the Black Grail and whose devotion Beelzebub finds sufficient. They are granted weapons, armor and equipment corrupted by the hand of the Archfiend in exchange for sacrifices brought to the altars of Beelzebub, which these warbands build wherever they go, objects of grisly horror constructed from the remains of their victims, shaped into the form of monstrous flies. The polluting effect of the Black Grail is the gift of Beelzebub, Lord of the Flies. Spread by the insects bred by his own hand in the seventh layer of hell, it is a tidal wave of his foulness in the form of demonic vermin, septicemia, tainted insects, plague and impurities that pollute both body and soul. Entire villages and towns are turned into half-living slush that bubbles on the ground, an agony of melted flesh quivering and crying at the multitudinous diseases granted by the Lord of the Flies. Those caught by the Black Grail are still aware of the horrible fate that has befallen them. Specialized units of New Antioch and the Free State of Prussia are dedicated to responding to these outbreaks with heavy flamethrower tanks using holy anointing oil as their fuel. But some victims of the Black Grail suffer a far worse fate. They are bestowed with the Black Honor by being melded with hellflies, growing into a grotesque winged insect made of bloated flesh. After this torturous metamorphosis, they take to air as heralds of Beelzebub, the winged squires and scouts of the Order of the Fly. Their vestigial human bodies are still conscious, as they are slowly eaten from within to be used as fuel by the herald. All the while, their warped bodies fight for the glory of hell against their will. The heralds are the vanguard in any assault of the Black Grail, and the ear-numbing drone of their wings strikes terror in any defender, breaking their focus and sapping their willpower. Heralds wield discarded weapons, contaminated with horrible worms that churn through them, which in turn infect their victims. Each diseased bullet has sentience of its own, finding even the smallest chink in any armor, burrowing into the nervous system and liquefying the internal organs from within. When the tide of Black Grail comes, many mortals cry out to Beelzebub in their despair, hoping that the Lord of the Flies would spare them in exchange for worship and servitude. But their prayers fall on deaf ears, for the Prince of Gehenna hates all creation and only wishes to warp it into a form pleasing to him and hateful to God. But there are few mortals, exceedingly rare, who truly share the vision of Beelzebub and wish the world to end in a putrid, parasite-infested mass, eternally writhing in the throes of the endless plagues bestowed upon them by the Black Grail. Many of them are secret and highly skilled killers, men and women whose pleasure is to murder repeatedly, plying their craft in secret, wishing one day to do it openly. From amongst such twisted individuals, the most depraved are inducted into the ranks of the unholy Order of the Fly, known as Plague Knights. When the Black Grail comes, they come out calmly and welcome the wave of corruption, not consumed by it, but rather warped into a cadaver-like creature halfway between life and death. They retain sentience, intelligence, and a dim memory of their past lives. making them extremely useful at leading the Black Grail into the isolated farmsteads and remote settlements that might otherwise escape the clutches of Beelzebub. The more living creatures a plague knight can find and warp beyond recognition, the higher they will climb in the ranks of the Order of the Fly, and the greater the favor they will find in the eyes of Beelzebub. Amongst their rank, there are 12 plague knights of great renown, made in mockery of paladins of the church, great champions of the fly. They dwell within Ekron, the city of Beelzebub, a place of such wilting horror that none dare to approach it, not even the mightiest of heretic lords. But sometimes the orders of their lord come to their ears, and then the mightiest of plague knights strike forth, following orders carried out by the deafening buzz of trillions of beating wings of hellflies. When the infidels opened the thrice-cursed gate to Jahannam, releasing the Gog and Magog upon those who believe, it seemed that all was lost, and Shaitan would emerge victorious over Dunya. But the creator of the universe came to the aid of the faithful, and as had been written, the great iron wall of Du al-Qarnayn manifested itself in the lands ruled by the Sultan of Rum. A call was sent to those who believe righteously, and over the coming decades the migration of all the faithful, second in importance only to the Hijra of the Prophet himself, took place across Europa, Asia, and Africa. Millions perished on the road and at the sea, for the heretics and their shaitan lords swarmed them as locusts swarm fields of ripe sesame, devouring them and building vile monuments and statues from their limbs and heads, so they could not be buried as is decreed in the holy texts. But once all those who survived the journey had come, the mighty gates of Al-Qarnayn were closed, and the great sultanate of the invincible iron wall of the two horns that pierced the sky was formed. The assaults of the slaves of Jahannam against the sultanate have never ceased since that day, and each day new martyrs are mourned as they defend the wall and confront the heretics who have overcome its defenses. But within the walls, the lost knowledge flourishes, and from mosques of white marble and gold, the muezzin call the faithful to pray for the success of the Sultan's army as it struggles to protect the lands within the wall and defend the caravan trails that provide the Sultanate with vital trade goods. The Iron Wall is the greatest defensive work in the world, a mighty bulwark festooned with the famed artillery of the Sultan. Azeb sharpshooters stand at ready, ever watchful for surprise attacks, and the elite Janissary regiments have barracks at set intervals near the wall, so they can react to any attack at speed.